Well, I'll ask you this after we talk about the next team that
Yes.
I don't think they're a dark horse any longer. They might be the favorites, but the Milwaukee Bucks. So this first to note, they are in the second apron, which means they can't aggregate contracts, but you can aggregate contracts if the deal gets you out of the second
Yep.
apron. And so they are
Yep.
6.5 million roughly above the second apron. Per Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, they are looking to move Pat Connaughton, who he has a $9.4 million player option. That's about his
Right.
salary for this season too. But for next season, that before we get into the Jimmy Butler stuff of it all, and the report is this comes from Sam Amick of The Athletic that Jimmy Butler is willing to go to Milwaukee. I wonder how much of this is the initial rumor about him not wanting to go to Milwaukee was wrong versus, oh, okay, the Phoenix thing isn't happening, so I'm slowly expanding my list.
Right.
That being said, from the Pat Connaughton perspective, because whether it's a 3-teamer or an independent trade just to get the Bucks out of the second apron, like, can you get off of that final year of his contract? Like, is Detroit taking seconds back to absorb Pat Connaughton?
It's so funny you asked that, because when I signed up for Blue Sky and started getting active there, that was one of the first things that I started talking to people about it, because like that we were just starting that side up, like from a basketball perspective, and everyone was trying to get conversations going. This was one of them, and the debate came up whether what would it take for the Bucks to get off Pat Connaughton, and like a lot of fans were like, probably a couple of seconds. Some other people were like, no, that's not enough. You have to give up like a future first to get off of him. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that no one around the league is going to look at Pat Connaughton as an asset. No one's going to be looking at Pat and going, oh, yeah, we'll take him on as a player and put him immediately into our rotation. That's great. What a get. Like, that's not the way the teams are looking at it. So the vast majority of what they have to relinquish probably has to go to that third team to take on Pat Connaughton, which leaves them with less assets for Jimmy. But like I've said, and maybe I'm just too low in the whole situation, I wouldn't relinquish a first for Jimmy regardless at this point. I'm just too worried. But also, like, I'm a safety nerd when it comes to that. I wouldn't have the balls to do it, which might be why I'd make a horrible GM. But we'll see. I mean, I think that is where they have to pay like the real value stuff, though, is to get off of Pat Connaughton, and not in terms of providing Miami with a legitimate asset for Jimmy.
And look, I believe they only have one tradable second round pick. They just have both of their 2031
Yeah.
picks, I
And
believe.
that's not enough to get off Connaughton. I'm sorry. It's just not.
You need another team to not even Marjon. You can't attach Marjon Beauchamp there. You need them to, like, you didn't have to be willing to include Andre Jackson or maybe a team like, or AJ Green. So maybe it's AJ Green in that second, like that type of deal. And then at that point, now you're giving up like chunks of your rotation, because any Jimmy Butler trade, the math that works right now, unless something substantially changes, Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, and Pat Connaughton to a third team. And then that 2031 first is the framework. And you probably need to include that second. I guess what you're hoping from there is that then can the Heat attach other, and they're not, by the way, Pat Riley like views second round picks as just dog shit, like at this point. So the Heat, I don't even know how many they have. Some seconds that they have the Lakers second next year. There's a swap that's going on with Indiana, so they could probably include another second or two. And the thinking there for them would be, okay, like Connaughton then isn't on their payroll, which he like theoretically couldn't be because of their own cap situation, but you are getting the Bucks's 2031 first. And so are you willing to send out your own 2031 second or that Lakers second, and then just 2 seconds? So like, let's just, in theory, the Lakers 2026 second and the Bucks' 2031 second to Detroit for like to take on Pat Connaughton's money. Is that like, are we closer at that point, or is that still not enough? Because, by the way, the other part of this, Detroit is good. So from their perspective, what's the value in helping Milwaukee get better? Now, I think you could just go around the league and say, is there a team with a trade exception large enough, or their non-taxpayer mid-level, that they would still take Connaughton in for? You could work it with game it with some smaller contracts. But like in a vacuum, are those seconds, a Lakers second in 26 and a Bucks second in 2031, is that enough to take on a year of Pat Connaughton? I think we're close.
It gets you in the door in terms of having a conversation. And I think you are making a real offer, right? Like, it's not, let's try to like hoodwink you into this one. Like, it's a real offer. What it comes down to is also the awareness of other teams knowing full well that the Bucks need this to happen in order to get Jimmy. We'll just say no. Like, you need more. You have to go out and find more. You have
It's
not our
it's
problem.
again, it's AJ Green or like Andre. Like those would probably be the two players they have where other teams might be, them in a second or seconds. Like now we're talking.
Here's what I think a lot of fans don't understand as well. When teams are trying to be looped in as a third team to make something work and they're not the beneficiary of getting like the star player, they are going to squeeze the ever living hell out of whatever they can, because it's teams that
unless you're the Pistons of the 2024 offseason.
Right. Yes. Correct. Correct. There are exceptions. And it's also, look, I'm not even kidding when I say this. I'm guessing very much that's why teams are trying to loop in teams historically that are bad negotiators as well. But like teams that are good negotiators will say, oh, you want us in as a third team, but we're not getting one of the key pieces involved in this trade. Fine, we'll help you out. You came to us. So that means we'll ask for something else that is juicy, that is delicious, and it's not going to take up something of ours. Like, we might be able to rent out our cap space, but that's going to cost you 2 or 3 seconds, even though it makes no difference to them. So if they're looping in a third team, I would need that third team to be the right team who like are unaware of the leverage they have in such conversations.
Or is it something like, I mean, and it would you'd be towing a fine line here, but so like look at Houston as an example, where maybe in their heads they think that this is all going to blow up in Milwaukee's face. They want to fast track the Giannis trade request so they can be involved in that. So they're going to offer to take on Pat Connaughton, and they will send out one of their small, like they have all these quasi expiring contracts, and they have a ton of flexibility within the new matching rules too. Yep. So it's, can you make it cheap enough, like for the trade with Miami and Milwaukee to work? And then in your head, it's all right, we get a couple extra seconds and we made the Bucks better this year, but we're in theory, but maybe this blows up in their face and they've gotten rid of their 2031 pick. And now Giannis is going to be available. And hey, look, we've got all these assets.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I hope teams think like that. I know they think like that. I'd like to see more teams act on thoughts like that.
Yeah.
Now,
there are so many ways you can strengthen your own team. It's not just through the draft. It's not just through, free agency. Like, it's creative long-term thinking like that really separates, the men from the boys.
I have 2 questions for you on this.
Yes.
You're the Bucks. This is the framework. It's those 3 players plus your first and that second, and you make it work. Are you doing this to get Jimmy Butler? You already said you wouldn't give up a first for Jimmy Butler, but if Jimmy Butler says he's going to stay,
that does change things. Yes. But if I'm the Bucks, like, just before we get into that, can I just fire Doc Rivers first?
We need to figure out a way to get Tobias Harris to Milwaukee and reunite Tobias and Doc.
Yes. And Ben Simmons on him in. Just get the whole band back together there. Okay.
Sign Gallo. Bring Gallinari back. Let's go.
So what is your question? I'm the Bucks.
Are you doing this? Like, whatever framework it takes, it's your 2031 pick. I mean, if you can pull off without, I don't know how, but is Miami's leverage so, at such a deficit that if you can keep your first round pick, then hell yeah, like you're doing this.
Again, if we're assuming that Jimmy is kind of like, I'm staying. By the way, I'm unsure of this because I don't remember every single minutia in the CBA. Could Jimmy theoretically already pick up his option now, or is there a trigger date?
No, he could pick up his option now.
Right. Okay. So that would be part of the negotiations. Like, if he did that now, like, yeah, I would relinquish that 2020 or 2030 first. Yeah. If I'm the Bucks, yes, because here's the thing. Even Jimmy Butler knows he's not going to be the best player on that team. I think that's such a specific version, or not version. That's such a specific system. That's such a specific situation. That was the word I was looking for, where Giannis is still the number 1 guy. Like, there's no doubt about it. Milwaukee royalty. He's the main dude there. For Jimmy to come in and realize, yeah, I'm not the top dog in here. Yes, I would gamble with that, assuming he picks up his option for next year. Absolutely, because I do think even Jimmy Butler is aware that Giannis Antetokounmpo is a better player. Yeah,
I agree, and just like given the level of health issues that Chris Middleton has started to deal with over the past few years,
Yeah.
you almost kind of have to do this. If
Oh yeah.
if it's on the table and it can get done, I don't know. The arguments against it would be you don't want to short circuit your future if you think that there's any iffiness with Giannis or even Dame moving forward.
Right.
The other two compelling things would be, all right, well, are you going to be able to afford to pay, like, will ownership pay to keep Brook Lopez next year? Because, by the way, if you're getting rid of Bobby Portis, Giannis Antetokounmpo is your backup five now, like that,
Yeah.
like certainly in the postseason, right? And that's a responsibility they've over the past few seasons shied away from. So, and I mean, you could argue when it's Giannis and Portis, like whatever, that's fine. But now you're kind of removing the, all right, well, there's no like there's no sort of cover here, no safeguard.
Right.
So I wonder if that factors in it all on top of just the, okay, where are we going to be in 2031 of it all?
See, I subscribe to the roster construction ideology more so like 2 stars in depth, unless, of course, the team that I have in place, like OKC right now, who have legitimately 3 stars, like there's a significant runway on some of their rookie contracts still. Like you can run with that until things get, too expensive, and then you're struggling to figure out what to do there. But like, yeah, that's a conversation. That's such a specific situation. We can't really get into that. But like, it's for the Milwaukee Bucks rather to go all in on Giannis, Dame, Butler, and then have virtually zero depth. I mean, it's not like I believe in it. If I'm the Bucks, like that should have been your first question. Let's revisit this whole thing. Your question to me, if I'm the Bucks right now, is: do you think trading for Jimmy Butler is going to lead to a championship or even close to it? My answer will be no, because of what I'm relinquishing.
Mhm. Yeah, but is it I guess going from Chris Middleton and Pat Connaughton to Jimmy
Right.
Butler is a
Yeah.
monster upgrade at this point.
It is absolutely. I'm not debating that whatsoever, but I'm also fully recognizing that Jimmy is looking for money in the future. So I'm probably going to have to re-up him for a lot of cash, because he's made that perfectly well known that he wants the bag. He's going to be 36 this year. You have Giannis, you have Dame. Dame is also getting up there. Now I'm paying for 3 guys in their 30s, and what my mission is, if I'm the Bucks, is to build around Giannis. Like I need to produce a product around Giannis that optimizes him. Does that specific constellation of stars do that? I'm not sure I have the answer for that. I'm inclined to think no. But again, like you said, I think it's a perfectly valid and reasonable thing you're coming here with, because like you're saying, like they're paying a shit ton of money for Chris Middleton and he's struggling. Like you need to do something else.
Now, do you know what would be interesting about this? Because let's say Jimmy does, like, I think we're also all operating under the assumption, and maybe he would just pick up his player option, but we're all operating under the assumption that he'll get his max over the short term, in which case, if you trade for him, you have $162 million committed to him, Dame, and Giannis next year. That's more than the salary cap is projected to be at. Next year's salary cap is a little under 155 right now. But like, and so when you could say, well, Chris Middleton also has a player option, but he's not going to command anywhere near. Is he going to be even cheaper than you thought? Where you could say, oh, is he going to cost half as much as Jimmy Butler or close to it? And then you could say, well, would you rather have Chris Middleton at 60% of the cost of Jimmy Butler next year? Maybe that's worth a discussion. But also, couldn't Jimmy Butler, in theory, just not, like, look what happened with James Harden, like I know Jimmy Butler, I think there'll still be more intrigue around him than there was in James Harden at the time. But look at the deal that James Harden got this year. Like, are we sure Jimmy Butler's even going to get $40 million a year if he opts out?
No, and obviously not. And I think that is, but that's the thing. That's where we're fighting the perception of Jimmy himself, right? Because even if no one is willing to pay him that, you could still see an argument where Jimmy see, okay, look, this market is just it's not there, so I'm going to pick up my player option, but then the market is going to be there the year after. Like I don't necessarily think that Jimmy is always dealing with the realities of a situation. And I think that thing could be something like that's a sticking point for him. Like it's been reported multiple times now. He went to Pat and was like, extension now, please, more money. So I think this is a very pressing issue for him. And if the Bucks are like, no, well, you can come here and then we'll see what happens. I don't think that's the approach. I think he wants the bag right up. Fair enough. Like, I'm not going to blame anyone.
And also, they can't play hardball if they've traded their last movable pick.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, this is sort of a side point, but this is something I've been talking about on the pod for years alongside Brian. This is why I actually want my main guys to be some of the oldest on the roster, because it becomes so difficult. Like, again, the Chris Middleton situation and the Dame situation. So you have Giannis, who's 30. Now you're surrounding him with guys who are older, meaning they decline faster. Giannis is earning top dollar. These guys are lowering their trade values because they're getting older themselves. They're getting worse. It's such a difficult job finding new secondary stars who can run that same timeline with Giannis, for example. Like, it's almost like, oh, we have to go out and get a guy like Dame, who's a little past his prime. Like, we have to go out and get a guy like Jimmy, who's definitely past his prime. Like, I do think there's so much value when you're rebuilding or just constructing a roster that if you have like a tier 1 superstar, that dude has to be one of your oldest players, because it just, your secondary, your tertiary, your fourth guy, your fifth guy, then they're on that string age-wise where they're not going to decline on you all of a sudden. That's just, unless something drastic happens, obviously. And that allows the effectivity of the number 1 superstar to be maintained for a longer period of time.
Any other Jimmy? So we both agree, though, that if you know Jimmy Butler's going to be there and you're the Bucks, you kind of have to do this. Even as well, they've played better since their poor start, so that's certainly a factor.
Yes.